Yeah, you may need to raise up your voice.
Is on setting up the first commitment.
Hello? All right. Good morning. Hello?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Thank you. I request that you move in front so that you occupy these seats so that we can get started on time. And those ones that are serving the cup of tea, please also just move forward. Please don't allow an empty seat in front of you. So occupy the very front seat. Please just move with your coffee or tea. Simon, I am waiting for you so that we can get started. Simon and Anne, please move forward. Janet and the team, please come on. And those ones that are serving tea and coffee, please join us on this end so that we can get started. And the tech team, please cue our national anthem, the first stanza in English. It will be our opening prayer. Please come, we have seats in front here for you to take up. We have a very tight program to cover today, so we really need to be conscious with time. Great. My name is thank you very much. Please hold it up. Hold it up. Thank you. Shall we all sorry for that mishap. Shall we all be upstanding now to say our prayer, which is the first stanza of our national anthem? Thank you. Please proceed. Let's take our seats. Thank you for making time and arriving in good time to participate in this very important discussion, courtesy of the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Center for Multiparty Democracy, Baraza Media Lab for hosting us, and the United Nations Democracy Fund for supporting this particular activity. My name is Frankline. I serve at the Center for Multiparty Democracy. I will be wearing different hats today and tomorrow, so please bear with my face. I know we are going to have a very serious discussion on serious issues, but that doesn't warrant our serious faces as well. So please, can we smile beneath our masks? Thank you. Great. I would like to quickly invite my good friend, Maurice Otieno, who is the Executive Director of Baraza Media Lab, to give us some announcements and important information that you should know as we stay here and he hosts us for the next 1.5 days. Welcome, Maurice, and please speak to us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Okay, we have tea behind that room there because I see all of you are so dull today. I want us to be a bit lively. As Franklin has said, these are serious discussions with a very happy face, right? So my name is Maurice Otieno, the Executive Director of Baraza Media Lab. Baraza Media Lab is an entity that exists to empower the Kenyan media ecosystem by providing this space for experimentation of your business models as well as your storytelling capabilities. But more importantly, is to offer this space for collaboration between different organizations, so media as well as civil society. So we are so happy today to have and to host Kofi Annan and CMD today here for these very important conversations. My other work that was cut out for me today was to tell you a little bit of housekeeping rules. I can see most of you have adhered to the masks, which is good because of the current situation we are in, also the social distancing. If you do want to eat or bite and keep the energies up, behind the phone booths, there's a station there where you can refill and get a bit more energy. I've just happened to mention the phone booth. So in between the event, if you want to pick a phone call, please don't rush outside. I know sometimes the calls are very important, you can't wait. There's a phone booth behind there that you can just walk in and use. If you want to relieve yourself or help yourself, you have to go outside. On the left side, that's where the gents are. On the right side, that's where the ladies are, okay? So we look forward to listening and hearing a lot from you guys and hopefully collaborating with all of you going forward. Thank you so much.
Honestly, you can't even thank the host. All right? So other than wearing a smile, please also be appreciative of the participants and the panelists and moderators. Good, this is a hybrid event, so we will also be having panelists joining us online. We will have also speakers joining us online. And at this time, I want to invite Corinne Momal from the Kofi Annan Foundation to speak to us and welcome us formally as partners to this event so that we can then be able to get started. Over to you, Corinne.
Thank you, Franklin. Good morning. Can you hear me? I hope you can all hear me. Good morning, Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, dear friends. On behalf of the Kofi Annan Foundation and the Center for Multiparty Democracy, Kenya, I would like to welcome you all to this workshop on safeguarding the digital space ahead of Kenya's 2022 elections. Let me first thank the UN Democracy Fund for its support and Baraza Media Lab. Thank you, Maurice, for hosting our in-person participants. I'm very pleased to know that representatives from various Kenyans and international stakeholders are here today who are working hard to address the challenges posed by social media to elections. In a very short time, digital technologies and social media have radically changed democratic processes and the electoral environment, not only in Kenya, but all over the world. While these technologies have unequaled potential to engage and to empower, educate voters, and to strengthen the integrity of elections, they also create new challenges and risk for fundamental democratic processes and citizens' political rights. Over the past few years, we've witnessed democratic erosion in many countries across the world, with political polarization increasing, trust in government institutions eroding, and more frequent attacks on the press and independent media. Digital technologies and social media are not the source of the problems, but their misuse and their abuse contributes without doubt to undermining democracy and citizens' rights. For that reason, Kofi Annan, our founder, convened a commission on elections and democracy in the digital age, composed of former political leaders, academic experts, and members of the private sector. The commission assessed the challenges for democracy and elections posed by social media and proposed a series of recommendations to address them. And these recommendations apply anywhere, including in Kenya, one of the most digitally advanced societies in Africa. So you're, of course, a much better place than we are to discuss the impact of such technologies and tactics in Kenya. But allow me to draw attention to some of the Commission's recommendations that may resonate with you. First, the challenge of hate speech. The internet has facilitated offensive and abusive discussion while allowing users to remain anonymous. Social media is increasingly weaponized to target journalists, activists, politicians, and women, especially, who are victims of hate speech online. This is particularly problematic around elections, when online hate speech can drive violence in the real world. The Kofi Annan Commission argued that political candidates can play a greater role in reducing tensions and proposed the widespread adoption of a pledge for good online behavior. Second, the challenge of disinformation. High levels of disinformation around the election prevent voters from making informed decisions and create distrust in media and in democratic institutions. This has exacerbated in recent years and has extended far beyond politics or elections. We've seen that some of the most heinous and dangerous disinformation has targeted the COVID-19 vaccines, for instance. Recent research by 2 Mozilla Foundation fellows revealed how malicious and well-coordinated disinformation campaigns on Twitter are in fact undermining Kenyan civil society. The Kofi Annan Commission argued that the scope of online disinformation is so large that only a collaborative network of actors can have an impact to address it. They pointed to examples of successful initiatives which convened journalists, fact-checkers, technology platforms, electoral commission, and civil society to collaborate in identifying and correcting electoral-related disinformation. So there are solutions. Such networks are being replicated across the world, and there are perhaps approaches that can also be applied in Kenya. Third, the challenges around the emergence of transnational political consulting firms. You're naturally familiar with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where improperly acquired personal data from Facebook were used to engage in political micro-targeting. Numerous examples from other countries also show a willingness of paid consultants to push polarizing and misleading messages with potentially devastating results. So ladies and gentlemen, I have talked a lot about risk and challenges. I hope that today we can also discuss opportunities afforded by social media, because there are some. And I hope that together we can identify and develop effective and homegrown solutions to the challenges posed by digital technologies in the specific Kenyan context. Kenya is one of the countries that actually give me hope addressing these issues. You have a young, dynamic, tech-savvy population, 83% of whom have access to the internet and who understand very well the need to reassert and improve fundamental democratic principles. You also have a vibrant civil society, creative entrepreneurs, and robust institutions. And there are indications that the government also is prepared to do more. It was Kenya, for instance, who chaired a recent United Nations Security Council meeting about the abuse of social media to incite hatred and violence, where participants called for more action from both governments and tech firms in preventing and reducing impacts of this problem. So it's very encouraging that it was Kenya itself that brought the attention to the attention of the Security Council to this real problem. So I remain optimistic that together, by working in partnership across governments, business, and civil society, social media can once again become a powerful force to engage, educate, and empower voters and deliver elections with integrity. It just remains for me to wish you all success in your proceedings and hope that the next 2 days will be very inspiring. Thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Corinne. And thank you very much for leading your Kofi Annan Foundation team to partner with us at the Center for Multiparty Democracy to convene this timely workshop focusing on safeguarding the digital space ahead of Kenya's 2022 general elections. Moreover, I join you to thank the UN Democracy Fund for its support and Baraza Media Lab for being our host today. As well, I wish to thank state and non-state actors, political leaders, academia, experts in the tech industry, including journalists and stakeholders from various Kenyan and international agencies for making time to meet over the next 2 days for these important discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya has acquired the status of a leader within Africa with its position as the Silicon Savannah. This elevated status owes to a number of advantages in the form of a thriving tech ecosystem, digitally skilled talent, geographical positioning endowment, and ICT-centric policies. As more products and services are digitized, digital platforms will play a pivotal role in transforming the way Kenya's people and the government, businesses, and civil society interact. More specifically, digital technologies will continue to inevitably affect our multi-party democratic practices. As we have already begun to experience, digital technologies enhance people's engagement on issues and decisions and promote human rights, thereby making government institutions stronger and more responsive. On the flip side, digital technologies can cause a severe threat to democratic practices. In a country like ours, where we have a nascent democracy, coupled with a thriving tech ecosystem, we must find ways to make technology work for and not against democracy. To aptly emphasize the timeliness and urgency of our deliberations today and tomorrow, I wish to draw our attention to the most recent development. Only last week, the government of Kenya announced the appointment of the National Computer and Cybercrimes Coordination Committee. The committee is set up under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act 2018 to perform a variety of functions, including to receive and act on reports relating to cybercrimes, to provide advice on computer and cybercrimes, a framework for training on prevention, detection, and mitigation of computer and cybercrimes. As the committee exercises its mandate, we have to remain vigilant to ensure particularly the issue of freedom of expression is not curtailed, especially in view of the upcoming general elections. Freedom of expression, as we know, is a basic tenet in a democracy, and it reinforces other rights, such as ensuring citizens freely access to information, peacefully protest, and hold their governments accountable. As part of our deliberations, therefore, we have to emphasize the importance of sustained dialogue with stakeholders. The dialogue should focus on striking a balance between limitations of freedom of expression online and safeguarding freedom of expression as guided by Articles 33, 34, 35 of the Constitution and relevant international instruments. I am confident that the program we have prepared for ourselves offers us sufficient opportunities to deliberate on this and a range of other relevant issues. Finally, I would like to emphasize that technology has joined money as the foremost discriminators in our politics. And we have to look at these issues and converse so that we can apply it in a way that we use technology to advance and not strangle our fledgling multi-party democracy. With those welcome remarks from Corinne and the introductory remarks that I've given you, I'd want to draw your attention as well here, participants online as well, on a pre-survey that we handling. There's a link, if you're joining us virtually, there's a link in the chat, or you can also be able to access a QR code so that you can take some time on your cell phone to be able to complete this pre-survey to help as part of our own evaluation and as we continue to sustain the dialogue. I want to thank you very much for keeping time as well and listening to us. And for the panelists that have joined us online, and the moderator, whom I will introduce shortly, and the panel discussion that we will begin with right away. And the panel will focus on the question whether we'll focus on the topic on the elections in the digital age, looking at emerging opportunities and new threats for Kenya's elections in 2022. It will be moderated by Mr. James Smart, who is the podcast editor at the Nation Media Group, as I invite him to also begin to introduce his panel that will consist of Alice Munywa, the director of Muradi, Innovation and Public Policy at Mozilla, Immaculate Kasait, who is the Data Privacy Commission chair, who will be joining us online, as well as Asha Mwilu, who is with us here, and she's the editor at large at Debunk Media. And we have Irungu Houghton, who is the executive director, Amnesty International, joining us virtually. Over to you, James, as you tell us a little more about your topic and also your panel that is tuning in virtually and the ones that are here with us in person. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our online panelists and audience. If you're joining us online, karibu sana. My name is James Smart. Good morning once again. I hope you're well. It's going to be interesting and intense 2 days. All discussions about elections have a tendency of having this sort of binary view. We either say you're for or against, and that happens a lot. I have covered, I think now 3 elections from 2007. And the technology keeps on expanding and keeps on being different. You know, in 2007, it was the question of bulk SMSs and how people could send thousands of SMS that, you know, they are fake, they're wrong. You know, 2013, it was about videos. It's about sending, you know, clips to WhatsApp in 2017. And this time is no different. We have these discussions all through. I want to bring in my panel now as we make these introductory remarks. Allow me to introduce Asha Mwilu, who's from Debunk Media. Asha, karibu to. Also online, we're joined by Irungu Houghton, who's Amnesty International, from Amnesty International Kenya. Karibu, Irungu. And also the Data Privacy Commissioner. I don't know if she's joining us online. Can we see our panelists online, please?
I'm here.
Okay, great. So, great. So the thing that I want us to focus on is, I think, 3 things. One is what has been captured by the 2 introductory remarks. And for the importance for us to sort of talk about the threats that we're experiencing currently. And then quickly transition to the opportunities on what we can do, okay? And the first challenge that I really want us to sort of get on, because that is the first thing that happens in every election, is the question of what online actually allows all of us to do. And that's the question of hate speech, right? And we have, at the moment, experiencing, you know, all manner of clips that come from different campaigns. I don't know if you've seen them, and they talk about very simple things like, oh, we were in this event and this person was booed, you know, in this event. If you look at the entire clip, for instance, that is not true, you know. And when the media doesn't cover this point of view of this person wasn't booed, as that is the story, then the media is sort of constructed as being fake news. I want to start with you, Asha, because you're here. On the question of just how we frame hate speech and the ability of people being in spaces and able to record clips and send them and they go viral, all right? Talk to us about what you see first in this election as a new thing that has come up, but also the fact that this is not really new, that we've experienced it, and we just don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, I think the minute you've mentioned the issue of clips from rallies, I remember before I got into investigative journalism and special reports, I was a political reporter. So I covered a lot of political rallies, followed politicians around as they were campaigning, during, especially closer to elections. And the way media was set up, I'm saying was because a lot of things have changed, there was a layer of credibility, fact checking, the way traditional newsrooms are set up. So as you get into the studio as a political reporter, you have to account for the footage that you have.
Yeah.
So whenever you would see exaggerated clips online of political rallies, there would always be someone that can be, singled out.
Yeah.
Where did you get this clip from? And there were incidences where political actors would complain that, hey, we've seen a crowd from this political rally that was not from that rally. Some reporter was paid or an editor was paid to sort of like exaggerate the crowds. It was easier to manage it. But when you look at what's happening online, things are moving so quickly, right? So first and foremost, and I think you and I have spoken about this, let's start with just the presidential aspirants that we have. Political camps have machinery for communication. They have, some of them even bigger newsrooms or newsrooms that are able to work very quickly, more agile than our newsrooms. And what that means is that they're able to control the narrative much faster. And that means if it's fake news or if it's hate speech, it can spread much wider and with little accountability. So for those of us now in the independent space who are fact checking, debunking, and trying to provide accurate information, you find yourself like stuck in a loop of trying to fact check videos and photos and information that's already gone so viral. And sadly, the damage is already done. By the time you're coming in to tell the audience, look, this clip was manipulated to fit this narrative, there's so many people who don't get to see the verification. And sadly, the damage is done. So that happened in 2013, in 2017, 2022. It's going to be at a high scale. We're already seeing it. One of the things also is that political players have hired journalists who are sacked from the newsroom. So you have people who first have the tools and the knowledge of providing information and spreading it to a wider audience, but they are serving the other side. And so I think the challenge is unprecedented, I would say, for Kenya this time around. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion about the solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Irungu, let me just come to you. The question about what happens, in terms of hate and online is an important one, but also it's sort of like a double-edged sword. On the one side, people need to have the sort of liberty to say what they need to say and the ability to say those things in very open spaces. But it's the thing that, happens during every election that sort of, it transfers power into authorities and government. And sort of there's this sort of clamp down that comes when, either an incident or a certain section of politicians are deemed to have strayed, a little to the left. And this brings sort of like an imbalance in every election time, and brings the question of how do you start manage, it starts very simple. How do you manage the online space so that it's not helpful? But by doing that also, how do you manage the media? So how the things of giving government all this ability to decide when you can go live, this ability of, the things you can say or not say. I want to speak to us about that challenge on how do we view it, and from where you sit, that we have the ability to say what we need to say, but they're not straying to the left too much. That gives, authorities the power, the undue power, if you like, to sort of clamp down on the freedom of expression itself. I don't know if Irungu can hear me. Do we have Irungu with us? Okay, I think okay, we'll get back to Irungu. Let me just pose the same question to Alice Munywa. Alice is the Director, Africa Mradi Innovation and Public Policy at Mozilla. Just the same question, how do we control our own space so that to have this ability to say what we need to say, but also don't transfer power to government, if you like? Okay, I think I have a problem with my online panelists. So Asha, we are with you. It is.
No worries.
Great.
They mentioned something about the team that was set up last week.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to know how far their powers go, or what exactly is the game plan from government side. Because I do think, yes, we have a need to regulate.
Yeah.
When you talk about algorithm transparency, we have to think about what the big platforms can do for the Kenyan election. I read this thing that was very interesting to me. There's a researcher, an American researcher, he's called Dr. Robert Epstein. If you Google him, you'll find his work. A very interesting paper that he did. He researched basically Google specifically, and the ability they had to manipulate voters' decisions. And he found, him and his team, because they were sort of like reviewing Google searches, and they found that Google had the ability to manipulate voters' perceptions and voters' preferences, and that in a single election, the platform has the ability to sway up to 20% of undecided voters towards a specific candidate by sort of like pushing, guiding, let me use that word, guiding the voters or the readers towards certain articles and certain content that was preferable towards certain candidates. They also, of course, have, and I don't know whether this has been done in Kenya, I don't think it has, these buttons that maybe on election day or 2 days before the election, tell the voters, have you voted or have you registered even right now? So that's massive power. That's Google. We haven't even gone to Twitter, where of course we know there are all these disinformation influencers who are paid to push certain trending topics. We haven't even thought about Facebook, and WhatsApp, the biggest platforms used by Kenyans. How do we regulate the algorithms? Is government thinking about, of course, there's cyberbullying and everything, but beyond that, how do we regulate what these platforms can do, the influence they can have to this election? Because what we all know is that from the political side, they have mastered how to manipulate the algorithms. We saw from Ruben Odanga's surveys with Mozilla that even during the Pandora Papers investigation, that so many accounts were paid to push a certain narrative, and so quickly. So what happens in the next election? Can government regulate the algorithm transparency in Kenya? Can they dictate what the big platforms can do in Kenya? How people can manipulate and use resources to manipulate the algorithms? Then, it's a snowball effect. Yeah. I'm very curious to know whether the representative from, like someone like Emmanuel or the representative from Mozilla, what they think about it, and also government. Right.
I think I'm seeing Irungu is able to join us. Irungu, and the market site as well. The same question on the ability of government to influence or sort of push, sort of content to people, and even political actors, sort of create this notion, for instance, that, this issue is the most important issue because it's pushed by 300 people online for, a certain period of time. It distorts the reality. It creates this sort of environment that, certain people want us to be in. So pretty much the same question on that, on disability and what we need to do with it.
James, is it possible for me to go first? And can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead now.
Can you hear me? Okay, great.
Would
so
you like
first of
to
all, thank you for the... I should be unmuted. Can you hear me?
All right. All right.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much, James, and particularly to the Center for Multiparty Democracy and also the Kofi Annan Foundation for the opportunity to be able to speak. I really apologize for not being there in person. I have some attending business to do, but I do hope to catch up with the rest of the conference in the course of the next couple of days. So I think there are a couple of things I would like to kind of comment on. First of all, when Article 81 of the Constitution that simply states that all election all elections must, must be free of intimidation, must be free of bribery, and all votes, everybody who is eligible gets the right to vote, and also that their votes are counted. But that article was never really, I think, thought of very clearly in the context of digital, the increasing digitization of our elections and the increasing digitization of our communication systems. So I think the Data Protection Act of 2019 has been a critical step forward in terms of building the legislative framework. But of course, it is a very young act. It is still enforced in many ways. We've seen this in terms of the personal information of citizens has been used to essentially flake the numbers of political party members, right? So this is the first point. I think that we are now moving into new territory. This next election will be waged, again, I would argue, on the basis of algorithms, on the basis of digital companies that are contracted to essentially, as you've suggested, inflate the sense of importance of a particular issue or a particular candidate. And I think we should probably start, if it hasn't been stated by Asha, with the view that, there are about 40 million voters who voted in the last elections. We have 88 million unique users of social media. And we have something like about 5 to 6 million people who are eligible to vote, but still do not have their voters' cards. I think the other thing that strikes me a little bit about the critical nature of a digital election is that 57% of the people using Twitter are anonymous, right? So the prospects for voter suppression, voter manipulation are extremely high. And the last point, which comes more directly to the question you've asked, increasingly, I have argued with many government people the obvious, which is that government is not governance, right? And the attempt by government to dominate, to monopolize, to criminalize freedom of expression ultimately is unable to create the society that is really a match for the national values of our country. So I think, besides the algorithm and transparency issue, I think we have to think about how do we create very powerfully additional voices who can interrupt the negativity, who can interrupt the disinformation, who can interrupt the incitement. And I don't think the only thing we can do is to censor and to criminalize. I think the thing that is really critical for us is actually how do you create new narratives on the net. So I'll stop there. And thanks, James. I should also just mention that I had said to the organizers that unfortunately, as a result of Professor Nadwa, who has been abducted and has disappeared, I will have to leave at 11 o'clock to do a press conference to update the country on his situation. So I will leave it at about 11 o'clock. But I do hope to join this conference in the course of the next couple of hours or a couple.
Thank you, Rungu, and thanks for having us go on for that important work that you need to go to. Thank you very much for your thoughts. I've also seen that the Data Protection Commissioner is with us, Immaculate Kasait. I don't know if I can just go straight to her. And this is pretty much a very new role. And the question that we always have in every election is government demanding data of people that either bloggers or people who are thought to be the ones who are straying to social media site, Facebook, Twitter, and that sort of thing. And we see these things happening all the time. Straight question to you. Is that going to happen this time? What is the security that you have? And if you could just very briefly explain your role in this election, because it's a very new position. Yeah. Can you just do that?
I hope I'm loud enough. I had indicated we'd try and get somebody on board, but it was not possible. So I'm on transit, and I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much, James Matt, and for the foundation, Kofi Annan Foundation, for this opportunity. I think I start from clarifying that we are a regulator. It would have been nice to have perhaps people mandated with issues around election, because they are the ones really responsible for making sure that there is a free, fair and election like IEBC on this forum. I cannot speak for them, therefore. I will just clarify in terms of what the mandate of the data commissioner is in as far as elections is concerned, of basically the overall role. One, of course, we are responsible for regulating personal data. When we talk about personal data, we're talking about race data, health data when it comes to UN and hospitals, and that's referred to as sensitive data under the Act. Socio-economic, conscious, belief, genetic, biometric, property, marital status. And really the role of the Data Protection Act is to begin regulating personal data so that it gives effect to the right to privacy. Ensure that processing of personal data is guided by the principles. And the principles we are talking about, and I will come back to the issue of principles just to give an overview of what then this kind of setup should have a consideration when it comes to election. The other one is protect the right to privacy of individuals, establish a legal and institutional framework, provide data subject and with the rights and remedies. How is the Office of the Data Commissioner supposed to ensure this work is done? One is a complaint or what we call security, taking up issues by its own motion. And once there's a complaint, we're supposed to embark on an investigation, and then we give what we call an enforcement notice, and then finally a penalty notice if the data controller or data processor does not adhere. It's important to underscore that we do not just deal, the electoral players are just one of our data controllers. We have telecos and we have banks. Anyone, think of anybody dealing with personal data, that is our role. Also just to bring to effect, as part of operationalizing this act, we have of course regulations which have been pushed to the Attorney General, and upon gazettement, they will be tabled at the Parliamentary Committee on Delegated Legislation. When it comes to elections, what have we done as far as this space is concerned? You recall some time back, there was a lot of complaint in terms of people who found themselves registered by political parties. We have now developed what we are calling a guidance note. And basically the guidance note, for electoral purposes, which is available on our website. And the guidance note basically applies to the Electoral Commission, ODPC, or ORPP, political parties, observers, and civil society organization, faith-based organization, volunteer organization. And basically the guidance rules will assist data controllers and data processors dealing with matters to including sensitive data, to understand the obligation under the Act. Say, what is the lawful purpose? It's very well clearly stipulated under the Data Protection Act. When they do data protection, the issues you must do, are you processing the data lawfully in a fair manner? Is there purpose limitation? Now, you don't just collect information for the sake of it. If you say you're collecting for purpose A, it must be purpose A. Ensure data minimization, so that you're collecting information that you don't need information, you don't collect everything. Accuracy of the information, storage of limitation, integrity of the information, and accountability. Of course, some of also the principles there are issues around consent, and the consent must be expressed and it must be informed. The other issue that is important is taking into account the rights of the data subject. So a data subject, in the case of a voter, for instance, they can demand to have the information. They can also demand that the information is rectified. So there are a bit more, I could go into on and on in terms of some of the rights and the rights of the data subject that are provided for. We have tried to address issues around election during the guidance note. Hopefully you have an opportunity to look at it. Thank you.
Okay, I want to go down to Alice also. So Alice online, Alice Munir, who's from Mozilla. And I don't have Alice. I think we sort of lost Alice. But yeah, so let's get back to you. Irungu, just I know you need to leave, so let me dispense with you at the current lazy for the moment. We've had from the last people were supposed to sort of control the elections, and the sort of all government bodies that were supposed to control elections. We've had several for maybe a month or so. repeating almost the same thing, that we will not switch off the internet. For whatever reason, no one has asked, but we keep on hearing this. What does that tell you?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that, you know, switching off the internet or throttling the internet, or let me just check whether you can hear me. James, can I proceed?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, so we have to recognize that, you know, throttling the internet either entirely or, you know, partially, or switching off a particular social media platform is becoming the preferred strategy for incumbent governments to essentially manage elections. And I use the word manage lightly. Another word would be manipulate the elections, essentially, because the sense of isolation that voters have during this, you know, period, a very fraught period, an uncertain period, is always traumatic. And it's, you know, it's currently happening not in an election, but in the context of Sudan at the moment, just to give you a very contemporary example. But we know of many other countries where this has been the case. And therefore, reassurance and a declaration that this will not happen is welcome. But I think we need to see a number of things in place. I think we need to see corporations who primarily, you know, provide the backbone for our internet and our telephony services. We need to see them making declarations that as internationally recognized companies, they will not be a party to this. The cost to the economy is just too high. The cost to our democracy is just too high. I mean, imagine what it will be like if we didn't have access to M-Pesa for 3 or 4 days, or heaven forbid that we go back to the switch off that we saw in 2018. So I think the companies need to come out and speak this and make this declaration as well. I think there needs to be international, multilateral statements that this also will not be acceptable during this period. And I think ultimately we need to see citizens rise and say that, you know, this is not how we wish state officers to manage elections. But I think the other part of this is really thinking about, you know, how do we manage the elections so that we have not just an elections, but an electoral environment that is free of intimidation, that is free of trolling. And of course, given patriarchy and given the elitism of our politics, it will be the poor and our women candidates that will essentially face the brunt of this, as is, of course, our journalists as well. And I think there are a number of women journalists who are very concerned about this. I think the other thing that can be done at this time is really to get training and capacity building and protection strategies in place for all of us who would like to use the internet responsibly during this period, and to make sure that we are not throttled alongside the internet. And I think the last kind of thought that I had about this was really, how do we ensure that we don't see micro-targeting and manipulation through adverts, through hashtag acceleration, through anonymization of information in a manner in which we, the voter, get so whipped into a state based on lies and false information. I think this is the other big challenge for this conference is, do we have some strategies that would allow us to be able to keep an informed voter informed based on their interests and not manipulated into some echo chamber that is controlled by people that we don't even know? Thanks, James.
Thank you. So just a reminder that if you're tweeting and online, you can follow the conversation, hashtag #TechForDemocracyKE. That's hashtag #TechForDemocracyKE. Asha, to you, do you have comfort having covered the elections that you covered? Because I got that, you know, the power that bees that says, well, we'll not switch off the internet. That's a good thing. No one asked in the first place. Does that sit right with you?
No, actually, particularly when I listen to both Irungu and Immaculate, and I don't know what the people in the room feel, I'm not feeling very optimistic, because first, sort of like the solutions that Irungu is proposing 10 months to the election feel like this sort of like big elephant that we have to attack, right? And I think the ecosystem already exists for all these vices to happen. When you say about women being targeted online, women candidates, women are already targets of a lot of, online pages. So I don't know how we're going to regulate because the election is here. I feel like there's a foundation that needed to have been set earlier on, and right now we're playing catch up. So I think we're talking about how do we minimize sort of like this big monster that we're about to encounter. I feel that looking at the last election, I remember when there was pockets of violence, especially in Nairobi, even the Red Cross Secretary General had to come out and say, look, there's a lot of user-generated content that's circulating on social media and that's causing a lot of anxiety on WhatsApp and on Twitter and on Facebook. I'm wondering whether we've thought about what will happen this time around, right? Yeah. We already see what user-generated content does in our context. Think about the gossip blogs and the gossip pages who have managed to set the agenda, even up to 2 weeks, and even set the agenda to the extent that national papers now carry stories that have started from those pages. Have we thought about what user-generated content, for instance, and those gossip pages can do in the context of like an election that is sort of like going out of control? Possibilities. I wonder, and maybe from Immaculate, the regulator who is saying that you have to first receive a complaint and then, like the normal Kenyan system, set this committee task force that will investigate, and then we will, say that there's been a complaint. Like the process seems very long. Have we had the regulator doing anything with all the issues that have come up online before even the election? How has the regulator handled it? Yeah. Is the regulator aware of
James,
the disinformation influencers? The fact that every single morning you will wake up and the first 2 or 3 hashtags on Twitter are paid for. Does the regulator know about that? Have there been any complaints? I feel, because I'm not very optimistic that we will be able to adequately address all the issues that have come up, I feel like the opportunity we have this election is to get research that then we can use to sort of inform the policy decisions that will come. When the US and the EU were discussing algorithm transparency and how to regulate that space, they had research, right? There was something that happened with Facebook in 2010 where they had this push notification targeted to 60 million Americans. That's about a quarter of the population at that time. And the research that came from that, the question mark was that, how do you allow these big tech companies to, sort of like set the agenda on an election at this level? That research then was used to inform the sort of like policies or even conversations. And by the time you get Facebook before the Senate, there's things that are being quoted. Do we have even research from 2017 in Kenya? Do we have research from 2013? Will we have research from 2022? I feel like that's one opportunity, at least to start coming up with solutions. Yeah. But I'd really like to hear from the regulator about...
Yes, regulator, straight. I want to get to the solutions.
James, I want to clarify that...
questions of what have you been able to do so far with being in office as a regulator, and the proactiveness, really. That's what we're looking for.
Let me clarify that I regulate personal data, not elections alone. I think it's important that even as you apportion responsibility, we apportion responsibility to where it belongs. And I did say it would be important to bring the Electoral Commission on board, because my simple understanding of a fair election under Article 88 of the Constitution basically talks to creating an environment for everyone to be there. As an office, I have said what we have done is to provide a guidance note. And we don't just speak to, let's talk about personal data. Personal data that affects beyond elections, it also affects telecalls. And I have gone back to saying, what have we done? We have provided a guidance note to people working in that space. It matters election require, I would have hoped the collaboration, it's not one size fits all. It's something that touches on other organizations, those that deal with regulate communication, those that regulate violence, those that regulate women's rights, those that regulate, perhaps it's because I am, I agreed to come to this forum because then it becomes, then I take on some of the concerns that are being raised. I may not be able to. And that's why I go back to my concern. I said, we have provided what we are calling a guidance note. And I did say, our mandate doesn't stop when it comes to just issues of expecting a complaint. Our mandate also requires us to take on board when we want to actually conduct an investigation. On the guidance note, the principles I have highlighted to in terms of what is expected of personal data. Personal data I have said about the legal obligation, the public task, the legitimate interest, the consent. I believe that this forum, therefore, is also an opportunity that your findings from this meeting will also inform the Electoral Commission, the registrar of political parties, in terms of how then they will be able to help in terms of creating a fair playing ground for that space. And what Irungu has said, other institutions that also are playing in terms of communication. Our work, I reiterate as a data commissioner, is to look at personal data, which goes beyond that scope of just elections data.
Okay, thanks. Let me get some questions from my audience first here as we transition to sort of the solutions. Do you have concerns, questions here as we wind this down? Yes, please. Yes, we can hear you. Just go ahead. There's a microphone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
My name is Fabian Lange from the Kofi Annan Foundation. I would like to ask a question about the targeting of women and women activists, politicians, and journalists through social media. So the weaponization of social media that's targeted at women specifically, and wanted to ask how women candidates and journalists and activists can use social media to engage in elections more effectively, and how they can also be protected in a better way. Thank you very much.
Okay, could I just get 2-3 questions so that I come around here? Okay, yes, please, to the right.
Hi, good morning. My name is Simon with Elog. So my question is mainly on, and I think Asha has tried to talk about it, it's about data. Because we are talking, this is the age of data. And you find that we don't have research. For example, right now, the penetration of WhatsApp is very high. So we can always get a message goes viral in a moment, a small video. And sometimes you find a video is usually taken in a very short way that now gives you a negative thought. So I think this is one of the things that we need to think about. And we can also think about the political parties, because every morning you wake up, you will find a hashtag targeting especially the top 2 presidential candidates. There's always a hashtag. So thinking about the mitigation measures. And I think that is one thing which is very important, and we need to think about it. Even if the data commissioner says it's more about personal data. So I also think about that political issue needs to come up.
Absolutely. Let me go to the online audience. I've seen someone has raised their hand. Okay, so when I get directions of that, we'll go to the online. I've seen people raising hands and questions on the chat. Let me get to Asha. The question about safety and targeting of women and journalists and members of civil society activists, it's an important question that keeps coming back because it's easy for one to be sort of targeted, and you see all these hashtags or a group of accounts online that would target, say, an activist for whatever reason. it's something that keeps happening. How do we first look at it to frame it properly? But what do you think needs to happen? Even as speak from what the data mentioned about collaboration, right? How do we need to look at this, and what do we need to do to fix this?
Okay, I don't know if I have the solution to that, but I'll take the question about women. In the last election, I was working for KTN at the time, and I worked on this documentary where I followed 6 women on the campaign trail. Honorable Martha Karua was one of them, Honorable Lesuda, Millie Odhiambo. So I followed like 6 of them just to look at the challenges that they face on the campaign trail. And at that time, of course, there was debate about the harassment, the violence, people going very personal with them. And one thing that we observed while filming this documentary is that political parties, first and foremost, do not support women. Even the ones who, are very vocal or are very supportive towards like the flag bearers. Political parties basically do not fund campaigns of women, and they're left to their own devices. So that's one of the first challenges that we noticed. And I think it's the same. When you look at even the online machinery, you'll find that it's very skewed against women when it comes to, trying to campaign online, trying to build pages, trying to build. Sorry, I think, yeah, okay, I've got it back. So trying to build teams around women politicians. And so it becomes easier for them to be targeted. Yeah. And I think it's amplified more. Also because of how our society is shaped, it's the negative messaging against women is amplified more because even our media, for instance, it doesn't really understand how to cover women well. And I think that's what we need is just resources, more resources around women politicians. You saw that men also are getting targeted. I mean, Dr. Muhisa Kitui, you saw what happened to him, for instance. It's going to be more widespread when it comes to women, when it comes to activists, when it comes to journalists. So it's all about how do we ensure that first women politicians have the tools to protect themselves online, have the tools to ensure that they can also, for them, they can set the narrative on their campaigns, on their manifestos, on their ideas. And so I think it's a matter of resources, just like it was on the campaign trail. The women didn't have enough resources to campaign. They didn't have enough resources to mobilize bigger teams around them. So even online, that's one of the solutions perhaps that I see for that problem.
Yeah. I see under Martha Karua is, on this call. I know she has a panel in the afternoon, but if I could, and if she's here, Martha, there's a question about women getting targeted. And from where I sit, I don't think there is a politician who's more experienced, not just on the national platform, on the ground level, on how sort of the micro-targeting and the targeting of women, targeting of politicians than you. And that happens all the time, even to date. We've seen hashtags about you. And the question for you is this: as we try to look for solutions on what exactly needs to happen, in terms of clamping down, this is unnecessary hate, if you like. From where you sit, what would be the solution that you would say needs to happen for us to have an environment where politicians, activists, journalists can do what they need to do without unnecessary hate? Is Martha still online? Okay, once we get back. So just as we went on this panel, the final question and the final sort of thing to think about is the question of the technologies. And from 2013, when Cambridge Analytica showed up, while we know very clearly that Cambridge was eventually found out internationally and quote unquote decommissioned, they still had a fantastic infrastructure in this country. There were close to 6 production houses that were put together specifically to cover this election in 2013. And they were extremely active in 2017 and even multiplied, if you like. They're still there in 2022. You can still see their traces. So while we talk about how Cambridge is decommissioned, in Kenya, the infrastructure is still solid and still strong. Asha, as we wind down, the question is this: the it appears the political class and people who are involved in political technologies are not only more experienced, but with more resources than the people on this other side. You know, the journalists, the newsrooms, the activists, and everyone else who wants the good. How do we balance this out?
I think to begin with, probably training. I've spoken to people who've conducted a survey. I think they're yet to release the results, and they've shown that in mainstream media, about 60% of the journalists covering this election have never covered an election. They're, you know, they're completely new journalists. So that's one challenge. How you have people on the ground who are supposed to be the fact checkers, who are supposed to be the people who can investigate, don't have the correct training to cover the election. They don't have the correct experience. So number one, that's one thing to think about. When it comes to Cambridge Analytica, we all know that Kenya is a testing ground. This is where a lot of tools are tested before they're used in other elections, in other countries. And so I think, you know, when the government regulator, Immaculate, talks about collaboration, this is one area where really we can talk about collaboration. What tools are going to be tested in this Kenyan election? We already have the history, right? We already know what's been done before. We've already heard about Cambridge Analytica. Are they already in motion? What, I guess, you know, what Immaculate is proposing is that the people who will participate in this workshop and our organizations, how do we come together to sort of like put something more structured and not work in silos? You know, I do agree with the regulator that that's one area we can work on. Collaboration, let's not work in silos. What tools are going to be tested this election? What can be done to sort of like stop the influence? You know, can we speak to the big tech companies? And I don't know whether they're in the room, but can there be a conversation about how their platforms are being used? Do they have enough resources to even think of how to regulate on enough? Really? Do they care? But we should make them care because they exist in our ecosystem, you know. And I don't know. I just think it's the beginning of the conversation. Sure enough, but I do feel that we're dealing with something that's it's already so convoluted that whatever solutions you come up with now feels like you're just playing catch up. So I think putting them on the spot and making the big tech companies accountable for already what's happening for the stage that's been set could be a good starting point.
Okay, I want to thank you all for your attentiveness. Thank you very much for online and my panelists who've tried so hard to make it online in spite of the challenges here and there. We really appreciate that. Appreciate your attentiveness. Asha, thank you very much for your thoughts. This has been the first panel. My friend and colleague Janet Mbugua from Untitled Foundation comes absolutely after this, after a very short break, and she'll be handling how should social media be regulated to strengthen rather than undermine electoral integrity. So sort of like a continuation of this, but in a more granular way. So thank you very much. We're still on this. It's the first panel, it's the beginning. Franklin.
James, please appreciate James and Asha. Thank you very much for the wonderful conversation. It's time for a quick health break. Then we come back to the next panel that I think we have the moderator already with us and the full panel. So please, let's take another 15 minutes to just have a health break so that when we come back, we're comfortable enough to sit through the next hour of conversation. I believe there's still some coffee and tea right behind there. Please feel free to grab one cup and come back so that we can start exactly at 11:20. In the meantime, I'll request that we all come here for a photo opportunity, quick one, then we can take our break. So please, camera guys, you can be able to organize us very fast. I think the tall ones behind, the short ones in front, that would be nice. But if you sufficiently short and you want to be uplifted, please feel free to take on the stair that is right here. Please, can we come here for a good opportunity? All of us, please. Thank you. Karibu sana. You can organize us. We need to do a photo. Please, yes, please come. Let's take a photo. Yeah. we have an enhancement here. Yeah. Let's see how many. Please. Shall we please, Patricia? Welcome, please. Yeah, you can organize us the way you want. Please. And another here. Please. We'll have a 15-minute break now. Then we can get started at 11 times. Yeah, I think we should. All right. Let me do a quick picture here. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, because it takes so long. A cable. Are you on the panel? Yes. Everybody else is going to be on panel.
One, two, 1, 2. Mic test. 1. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic
check.
Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check.
So all these four are fine. Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check. Okay, speak on that.
Mic check.
Again.
Mic check.
Again.
Mic check. Mic check.
Good.
We also have this one. Yeah.
This one.
Okay.
Frank needs to have that all the time.
Okay, give Frank.
See, he's the MC in his house.
Yeah.
He needs to have that all the time.
So is it him that's holding it wrong?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah, watch HK microphone.
Yeah.
Clear microphone.
Yeah.
Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check. Mic check.
Speak. You still have to speak.
Okay. Oh.
Hakuna changes. Either stand pekee ndio utoe utagonga. Switch off.
Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Yeah. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Kofi Annan.
He's this way.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Kofi Annan event. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be here. Somewhere. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Kofi Annan event. It's about 11 o'clock. We are currently on a break. We shall be back after the photo session has happened and tea has been had. Currently, we're on a commercial break, so take some time to get to know one another, interact with one another. Then we will follow. Okay.
Holding room, yuko?
How are you? Good, pleasure. Good to see you. Unasema aje kukaa hapa ndio nini?
Yeah. So this is our other boss at CMD-Kenya.
I am a very small one.
Fabian, are you okay? Are you okay?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Belly ice cream. Belly ice cream.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unaona ukiongea hausikiki.
All right, good after tea. Please let's settle down again. Let's settle down again so that we can begin exactly at 11:30. I hope that the online audience, you're still with us. Not too bad. We had 30 participants taking the break. We have 26, so the 4 should be joining us shortly. Please, let's take our seats again. Let's settle down so that we can begin at exactly 11:30. The next panel will be moderated by Janet Mbugua. I will quickly invite her to take the stage so that she can invite her panel and introduce her topic. Thank you. Welcome. All right.
Thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning, 11:30. It's a pleasure to be here and to continue on the conversation that was just hosted by my colleague, James Smart. It was amazing listening to James and Asha exchange really real-time experiences and ideas based on the fact that this is a space that they have been in for a long time. And so I'm Janet Mbugua, as Franklin has said. I'm a media person, founder of Untitled Foundation, and I'm also in the digital space. So let's try and navigate how best we can regulate these spaces, especially ahead of a massive transition that the country is going to be experiencing soon. I would now like to invite my panelists. One is online and the rest are here with me physically, so I'll invite the physical ones first. We have Joseph Nzano. Joseph Nzano is with the Communications Authority of Kenya. If he can begin to make his way onto the platform, I can see him coming. And then we have in place of, from the DPP's office, we have Lillian Obuo, who is the Chief of Staff from the DPP's office, and she'll talk a little bit about the sort of like the prosecution around these cases. So if Lillian can also make her way to the front, to the panel with me, and Wycliffe Mwatu, National Cohesion and Integration Commission, NCIC, if you can also just make your way to the panel. And as they settle down, we have streaming in Ken Ogutu, researcher on criminal justice, governance, and rule of law. He'll be joining us as well from the screen. And as mentioned, this panel is about how should social media be regulated to strengthen rather than undermine electoral integrity. And, you know, as we've just learned, we're dealing with a different, more disruptive element of how the elections can be influenced. I think James highlighted it pretty well, dating back from the 2007 general election, which I was also a part of. I was a news anchor and reporter at the time, and then going forward to 2013 and 2017, and just seeing how much it's evolved, not just here, but globally. We've seen what these digital spaces have been able to do in terms of influencing an election outcome, to the point where now there's policies and regulations that are in place just to stifle a lot of what could be, what could really get dangerous. We need to try and find ways to regulate the vitriol and regulate the influence, because people's lives are affected real time. And I'm a social justice person, so I'm always going back to how does this affect people's lives? And so with that, we'll have a discussion before we open the floor to questions and online as well. We thank our online audience for streaming in. The hashtag is Tech for Kenya, I believe KE, Tech for Democracy KE. Tech for Democracy KE is the hashtag, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's talking about how we can use the digital space to influence democracy in the country. I'm going to start with the NCIC, and again, it's open to anyone. But Cambridge Analytica, a political consulting firm, was accused of using improperly acquired personal data from Facebook to engage in political micro-targeting in 2017 elections. Since then, Kenya has made attempts at regulating online speech and the use of personal data, enacting the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act in 2018, which we'll learn more about the status of that shortly, and a much younger Data Protection Act in 2019. And we heard about those previously. We heard about some of these, but I think now we need to move to how effective they are really. Like, have these laws been effective in controlling any spread of hate speech? And I think I'll start with you, Wycliffe, to speak to whether that has played any part in being effective on the issues around vitriol.
Good morning, everyone.
I think you can remove your mask, the panel, if you're comfortable with that. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning once more. Yes, I'm Wycliffe, as Janet has said. Well, in terms of these policies, in these laws, in these acts, in terms of how effective are they? Now the question I'll pose to you is, do we understand these acts? Yes, they are there, but effectiveness, they are there. But what we need to do, because we have the Cyber Law Act, we have NCIC Act, which will prevent most of the politicians to stop hatred messages and so on. But how are we using them? They are there. The way only we need to do is to do a bit of capacity building. Because unless we do that, the local people from the society will not understand this complex. It's only people in the urban areas who understand that NCIC, CA have a policy, have some guidelines, the cyber laws are done. So the only point I'm addressing is the laws are there, they are good, but the only key thing we need is do a bit of capacity building and advocacy.
And I think following up on that, because you've mentioned capacity building, you've mentioned that it's important, but you know, we're running behind on time in the sense that these were essentially put in place to address the onslaught of vitriol and political manipulation, if you will, when it comes to using personal data to escalate how to tilt an election. But maybe I can throw back to you and also to Joseph here is, we may have passed the point in some way of capacity building. What can we do now, given that we're months away from the election? The Data, the Protection Act and all of these policies exist. What can be done in the interim? What is being done in the interim to regulate social media? You can answer that briefly, and then Joseph can also pick up on the same.
Yes, what can be done now is issue of ethics, self-regulations. For us, we have only like 10 months to elections. For us, the media houses, the social media providers, the social media platforms, we need to understand to be self-regulated, because unless we do that, we'll have all the policies, we'll have all the acts with us. But even if we are not self-regulated within the next 7 months, I mean, we'll be going back to the era where we'll have been violence. Because of the politicians, they are using social media, especially the digital space, for them to mobilize, to call for elections, even the polling. We have seen what has been happening before in the by-elections. We don't need some institutions, but through the digital space, people are having the polling stations in their own. So we need to understand the correct ethics. And we can only do that if we can only, between this time, we are self-regulated, we are disciplined about issue to do with the digital space and the content which we publish. Unless we understand the clear message we are pushing, we cannot do much as a society, as a country.
Lillian will come soon to scaling how those become issues of prosecution. But Joseph, again, off of what Wycliffe has said, I think I guess that's best case scenario, you know, in terms of self-regulating. I don't know how realistic it is, but your thoughts on between now and the next few months, are there any measures that are being put in place with regards to these and how that's translating to change?
All right. Thank you, Janet.
Yes.
Hello. 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 Can you hear me? Hello. Okay. Yeah, that's better. Thank you very much, Janet. Thank you for the question. I'll give you a perspective from the Communications Authority, and this with regard to the fact that we have been around on the cyberspace for a while, basically looking at what is happening there. And when we were doing the 2017 elections, we roughly had about 3 million social media users in Kenya. As we speak now, currently, it's estimated there are almost 11 million social media users in Kenya. During the COVID period alone, there was a rise by 2.2 million. So what does that mean? What does that mean is that anybody who is getting a smartphone out there has accessibility to social media. But again, the do's and don'ts in use of these platforms is not very clear. So you find now that capacity building and awareness is an ongoing process. It may not mature. In fact, I think it will actually never mature. It should be an ongoing thing that should continue to be done now more than ever before. So it should be more of a collaborative effort where we have different agencies, service providers, the media, anybody who is in the cyberspace to try and educate and inform each other that whatever you actually post in the cyberspace, whatever you type and click and post can have either a very negative effect or a very positive effect, especially as we head towards the general elections. With regard to your question on how we are doing now, what is doing in preparations, a lot of collaboration is happening, mostly from the government ends and also from the various service providers. And this should continue. It has not matured yet. We need to have more on board. I'm glad that we have this session here today. That's why the authority, we thought it very important to put it on top of the agenda to come and participate in this event, because this is part of the awareness creation efforts that we have. So the more we collaborate, the more we work on it together, the more we play each role in the process, it's when we can be more and more prepared. So we cannot rely, let's say, on CA alone or NCIC alone, or maybe the government to safeguard the internet space. The internet space is dynamic, it's growing. Every day you have new technologies coming in. Today we have WhatsApp, tomorrow we have, I think, Signal. The next day, Facebook has moved to Meta. The next day, you know, it's so dynamic, things are changing. We have the open internet, and also we have the darknet, all right? So these players are also in the darknet. They're also in the open media. So these are all things that we need to make ourselves aware of where the dangers are. And by identifying where the dangers are, then we take the necessary precautions to protect ourselves against them.
I'll come back to you about regulation shortly, because this is an ongoing daily occurrence of unregulated matters being brought out to the public eye. And again, as the previous panel mentioned, setting the agenda on national news, which in itself is something that needs to be looked at. And you know, when it comes to you, Lillian, it's about prosecution, and maybe we may have jumped the gun somewhat, because I still want to hear a little bit more about the regulatory process and what's being done on a day-to-day to ensure that we don't have misinformation widespread leading up to the elections. When it comes to the prosecution, the prosecution office, how have you managed to navigate with other agencies? Because as Joseph mentioned, it's kind of like a multi-agency and stakeholder approach. How have you managed to use what has come to your attention to prosecute effectively? Because I think once the public sees prosecutions happening real time and regularly, it gives the impetus that something is being done to address it. How can you speak to the prosecution process and the success of it as well? Yeah, try this.
Thank you so much, Janet, and thank you, Kofi Annan Foundation, for inviting the Office of the DPP to be here. The DPP would have loved to be here, but due to some emergency, he was not able to. So I'll try as much as I can to be able to represent what was intended to present here. So thank you again for putting us in a panel of different agencies, and this is really important. And so I'll start with the importance of interagency cooperation, which I'm already seeing here. For us to be able to tackle the issues of elections, we must, and I'm using the word must, I hope it's in capital, we must cooperate, collaborate, and coordinate with each other, not only as government agencies, but also with non-state actors, because elections affects everybody, and it basically determines what the sort of life that we can live as Kenyans and what our constitutions makes us to aspire for. So thank you so much for this initiative, and we are very glad to be part of it, and we are hoping to be part of many others. So what are we doing as an office of the DPP? Or rather, should I ask, what are we doing as a government to ensure that we are having a safe and fair elections, especially with regards to the digital space? So the first thing I want to emphasize is on that, as we're speaking now, we have various laws in place. We have the old one, the penal code, that speaks to elections in terms of incitement. We have the NCIC Act. We have the Cybercrime Act, the one that you just alluded to, Computer and Cybercrime Act. We have the act that regulates him, and of course, we also have the Data Protection Act. So speaking from where I sit, we already have if I may say, more than sufficient legislation in place to be able to properly regulate what you're supposed to be doing. And in addition to that, I think various agencies also have various policies in place. And for instance, like us in the ODPP, we have what you're calling decision to charge. And this is what we'll look at when a file is presented to us to make sure that the evidence in that particular file is sufficient to be able to sustain a conviction, whereby we hope that if you are able to sustain convictions in 1 or 2 cases, then we can build confidence in the Kenyans and ensure that others are not able to commit the similar offenses. So as I've said earlier on, there are various offenses, and the one I'd like to emphasize on is the one of publication of false information. And as earlier on discussed, we know that information is flying very fast. So we are ensuring that we must, as much as the Constitution recognizes the right to speak and right of freedom or whatever you want to say, but that must be spoken within the context of the Constitution, such that if you're going to be speaking about hate speech, then that one is a crime. And if such a file is presented to us by the NCSC, then we'll be able to prosecute the same. So I just carried a list of some selected cases that we've already started prosecutions, and we are hoping that by the time the elections will be happening next year, we'll have already gotten convictions, just to show that we are very serious about hate speech and related cases. We're also very serious about incitement, because we know that sometimes incitement can really cause damage. But one of the challenges, if I may go ahead, is that sometimes as a prosecution authority or even the investigators, the witnesses are not able to come forward and give evidence. So if you allow me, I'll just give you an example of sometimes back, there was a very senior Mheshimiwa who went publicly and said that certain people from a certain clan should not be able to stay in a particular region. And that person was charged, and we proceeded on well, but towards the end, I don't know whether some of you remembers when somebody say, Wamasai wote watoke Kayole, and that was captured, I think NTV captured it, and it was all over. But can you imagine, to our disappointment, the person who was able to record that information, the original information, was not able to come forth and give evidence. So we are saying that as much as the prosecution authority is able and willing to prosecute, then we must also have the witnesses who are able to come forward and give evidence, such that if somebody threatens anyone, then that person is able to be prosecuted to logical conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. I think sometimes that also speaks to concerns around witness protection, because it's a real concern. You know, a lot of us would want to report certain issues, and so I think there's a system that needs to be synergized, where even people who want to report, they have a sense that there's the witness protection element. It sometimes sounds very simplistic, but reporting a crime, even a digital one, you're compromising your life and welfare. So I think maybe later, as we go towards solutions, we can think through what would that whole ecosystem look like in terms of the crime, reporting, the justice in the end, and the protection of the witnesses. Before we move into very real-time reports, which are already published and which are speaking to incitement that is going to be in place, if I can put it that way, ahead of the elections, a huge concern. Before I move to that, I'd like to bring Ken in. You've heard the conversation, and I wanted to hear from you your thoughts on the effectiveness of all of these laws based on what the other panelists have said, whether it will take capacity building, self-regulation, reporting. Do you get the sense that this is going to be a factor in addressing social media and regulating it? Or do you feel that there's something else we're missing in terms of how we can begin to regulate social media ahead of the elections?
All right, thank you, Janet. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
I can see Ken is moving, but I don't know. I think you're muted. You can speak again, Ken. Let's see if we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
A bit louder.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Janet, for having me. I also want to convey apologies from the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ken. I don't know if it's on Ken's side or on ours. If we can try and see how best to get the audio from Ken. Bear with us, Ken. Let's see if it's on our end or yours.
Is it better now?
Yeah, I think it's better. If you could be a little bit louder, but you can proceed, Ken. We'll see if we need to interrupt you again. Sorry about that. Please carry on.
No, it's okay. I would have loved to be there in person, but then I fell ill over the weekend and I didn't want to come during this Corona period. So as I was saying at the beginning, I would like to convey apologies from the Honorable Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, who would have loved to attend the meeting, but was unable due to other engagements. So I'm here on her behalf.
Unfortunately, I think the room is struggling. Are you all struggling to hear, Ken? Is it just, I can see the audience can hear you, but the room is struggling. Ken, we'll come back to you very shortly. Apologies. We'll see if we can fix the audio shortly. Please hold on to your points. We'll come back to you. When it comes to this real-time matter of regulation, there's a report, and you'll just allow me to read here. Recent report by Mozilla revealed a whole industry in Kenya dedicated to the spread of disinformation through social media. It revealed that Kenyan journalists, judges, and other members of civil society are facing coordinated disinformation campaigns on Twitter. Are any of you aware of this report, first of all? Heard about the report? Wycliffe, Joseph, Lillian, are you aware of the report? You're aware of it. It's probably something that you received fairly recently. What's been the sort of like initial feedback or reaction to what to do with this report? Maybe I can start with that. Yeah, sure, you can go ahead and then.
All right. Those patterns are growing, and I'm sure Wycliffe will speak to that. We're having more and more what I would call online gangs, online influencers for hire. So it's a new a trend which we are getting now. And of course, if you have an interest, as I mentioned earlier, we are talking about a reach of about 11 million people, and they are well distributed all over the country, right to the most remote areas. So it's a rich audience of which, if you manage to get your way right, you're able to influence it. Now, the only challenge, of course, is the content. What is being communicated out there? Is it misinformation, disinformation? Is it fake news? Is it hate speech? Or what is being brought out there? So this was one case, of course, which was all over the media, and of course we are aware of it, and we saw it, of course, a good time. But generally, I wanted to say that it's a trend which is growing. If you just look into a platform like Twitter, for example, and if you just follow it from morning to evening, and perhaps if you have what we call the tweet deck, you will see a pattern. From morning, one faction, maybe politically motivated, would post insults or bad content. And then by the time we take lunch and we go back in the afternoon, another group has regrouped and they are answering it in the afternoon.
Yeah. Let me just come in. I think the trends exist. I believe a lot of us are aware of them. Maybe let's try and speak to, we don't want to assume that there isn't much being done behind the scenes. I'm sure there's an army of people in all of your organizations that are looking at a lot of these different cases. But I think if we can speak to, yes, there's misinformation, there's disinformation, there's hate speech, there's defamation. All of them are ongoing every single day at different times. And maybe at this point, I can also just bring in what I mentioned earlier about regulating and what you're doing. Even if I can speak from my own experience, I think Asha also mentioned it, as a woman, as a journalist, as a media person who has also been on the receiving end of news being spread unregulated, which has really devastating effects. And it's not about censorship, it's about regulation. So given that these are issues that emerge every single day, I think maybe the question that might offer some clarity, maybe some comfort is there a real-time solution underway as we speak right now in trying to curb and in trying to regulate? What does that machine look like? How effective is that machine in terms of trying to curb and regulate? And how effective is it? If you can both speak to that before Lillian comes to then again going back to some of these cases escalating all the way to prosecution. So what does that machine look like? You don't have to go into too much detail, but just top line, what does it look like when it comes to these cases coming up every day, identifying, curbing, regulating, and then sending it to the prosecution office?
I think I can address that, especially in these issues of that report and issues of the cases. Like you find like every day we get like cases like almost 50 plus, ethnic, hate speech, incitement to violence, and so on. But you find majority of these guys, they are being used by the politicians, the narrative they are sending, and others, they are anonymous. So the question is, what are we doing to stop the propagation of such things? Because one thing, if a message of violence or incitement has been pushed within the last 2 hours to propagate all over. So one, we are doing what we are countering such kind of messages. We try to counter such messages such that with peace messages. Secondly, we have a collaboration with the CA whereby we are in a position and the social media platform to bring such content down. We try to pull such content such that does not propagate, because the issue, what we are talking, we need peace. But the time that propagates to more people, it will be hard. Secondly, once we get a concrete information, we do our investigations about the propagator of such information, we file, we investigate, we process. But investigation, as Janet is posing, it takes a while. Investigation, we need clear evidence. We don't want to pick. We say it's Mr. YY who possesses such information. The time we push our files to ODPP, they'll ask us critical questions, the biodata, the time, the region, and so on. So it may take a while for us. And that period, what we do, we try to stop that narrative by countering with peaceful messages, going to that region and try to do sensitization forums, training, and so on. Or else we pull that content down.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, just to answer your question, Janet, the machine is actually me and you and all of us here. It's collaborative effort, right? So first of all, once you see bad content, the first thing you need to do is report it. Now you can report it to the authorities. You can report it to the service providers, wherever you have seen the content. And through all that collaborative effort, that's what Wycliffe is telling us, that the first step is to mitigate that message, right? And then beyond that, now again is now again collaboratively be able to inform each other through awareness that there are reporting methods, as you had earlier put. And also, once you report, like for example, at the CA, we have put a fully fledged incident response team. That's the National KSAT, where you can report any of these incidences anytime, including websites, a mobile app called the KSAT, where we know, because most Kenyans are available on mobile phones. So this is the meeting point. So I've also provided an app where once you come up with an incident, you're able to report it within the same device. So once it's reported, then now that multi-agency collaboration starts to work, which also include the private actors, as Lilian had rightly put it. It's not still a one-man show. It's still coordination. It's like a clock. We need to synergize. Every person has to play his role to ensure that this is met. So as we are headed towards this period, as more and more instances increase, then we have to more coordinated, more synergized, more expedited process, perhaps in a dedicated mode.
Okay, we'll try and get Ken back at some point if we're able to hear him. We've heard what Wycliffe and Joseph have had to say, Lillian. And this conversation, I guess, could be looked at as two-pronged, because we're looking at the digital space where the members of the public, but we're also looking at the political players and how they many times manipulate that, collect personal data that is then used to coerce an election, if you will. How challenging is it to prosecute, especially when it comes to political players? You were starting to allude to something that showed on the media, and then we went into witness protection, but a lot of the times people also get the sense that these laws can protect the political class because they are put in place to protect them for their own interest. So how do you then prosecute in that regard?
Thank you so much, Janet. And I was smiling when you mentioned political, because every time we take a case to court, there's always mtu wetu amepelekwa kotini. So there's always that political aspect of it coming up every now and then. But for us, it does not matter who you are. It doesn't matter whether you're a politician. It does not matter what position you're holding. in Kenya, if you've committed an offense, we treat everybody equally across board. So of course, the political card will always be played. We've charged somebody, then they'll go like you've been charged because you belong to a particular party, but to us as prosecutors, that does not matter. But allow me to jump into the issue of coordination and cooperation, and to just emphasize that we are coming in at the point when now we are more reactive as in prosecutions. So it is very important that we do more preventive mechanisms, as what my colleagues are already alluding to. And for us as ODPP, although we are supposed to be prosecuting, what we have tried to do is to again try and speak to various people through either our ODPP cafe. We are able to reach out and just discuss and also sensitize the members of public on various offenses and what is expected and how you can be able to even bring up an issue. But more importantly, before COVID set in, we had started going out to the regions and discussing with the communities to just hear what are the challenges and how can we make policies that are responsive. And this included issues on, and if I may say, most of the areas we went to, we recognized that women and children were really at the lower end, as in that the ones who are really suffering. And based on that, we've been able to develop responsive policies from our office on how to deal with women and gender issues. And we already have one of the divisions that specifically addresses SDBV and related issues, such that even when the elections are going to be coming in, then we'll be giving a keen eye on issues to do with women and related in terms of elections. And again, just to add that as an office, again, we have a specific division to deal with hate speech and election justice. And the officers already sensitized, and I know you've been working close with NCIC, they've gone to regions and also sensitized them. So it may seem like nothing is happening. I think we're just not shouting enough, but I know behind the scenes, a number of things are happening. I know last week there was a launch of committee under the Computer and Misuse Act. Again, that committee is just going to feed on to what is already ongoing. I also am aware that there is already a work plan on how to manage most of these things. So I'm saying that although we are coming in as prosecutors, there's also the preventive mechanism that must work alongside the prosecutions as we are ensuring that those who then violate the laws are properly prosecuted without fear or favor. Thank you.
Okay. It's interesting to note, you're saying that there's a lot of exercises going in. You're not shouting about it, because one of the questions I was going to ask is the sensitization exercises that are currently underway concerning the use of personal data in political campaigns. So you've talked about the fact that there is coordinated exercises happening. Can any of you speak about specifically exercises that are aimed to sort of raise awareness on personal data in political campaigns and what feedback you're getting on the ground with regards to enhancing the knowledge of the public when it comes to personal data being used for political campaigns? We're clear for Joseph. Yeah.
Yes, when you talk of the political campaigns, and choosing of the data, here, what I pose the director got to the politicians. These are the people who hire the bloggers. And how do we practice it? What are we doing? Actually, what we are having currently, we are having forums with the political class. We are trying to change the game, because we have seen before, if we don't teach the politicians or now to use their devices, their digital spaces very well, they will be able to misuse the local mwananchi, the other people. So that's one approach we are using. Secondly, we are working closely with IBC, because we find that in this digital space, most of the people, they are using pseudo accounts, fake accounts, and so on. Unless we teach the people, there are those cyber laws, there are other acts, and there are other guidelines which can tie them, which can, once they misuse the platforms, they can be arrested. Those are kind of the forums we are doing. Thirdly, as we are having these sensitization forums, training in all regions, we're trying to identify the hotspot areas, which we are trying to map around. And in every this, we are teaching them issues of using the social, especially the social media platforms and the digital space, the best practices. Because unless we teach the young juniors, the Form 4 leavers there, they'll be able there to just put funny details, funny information, and to be circulating in the society. So those are kind of things with the approaches which we are trying to teach them, especially during this campaigning period. Because actually, I know you all know the campaigns has already started, and unless we tell the people, let's not use social media as the only highway to do the campaigns, and we teach them the guidelines. Mambo itakuwa mbaya.
Joseph, as you answer that, you can also speak to engaging with tech companies on the same sort of coordinated education.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'd like to address the issue of personal information, which is very, very key, because obviously you will feel very bad once you find your personal information out there, perhaps alluded you belong to some alignments and you have never approved of it. So what we do, of course, at the authority and in a more collaborative way as government, of course, is to embark in supporting the efforts done by the data commissioner. And as she expressed earlier in the presentation earlier, they have various efforts in this area. One, there are the regulations which are currently, I think, at the AG's office, which are almost being approved, which will guide more importantly on issues of data protection, setting out procedures for enforcement, the right of data subjects, and also elaborating the duties and obligations of data controllers and data processors. So what this means is that eventually each and every entity will have to have a person called the data controller or data processors within that vicinity, who will look at the data within the entity of what is being disseminated, what we are holding as data which belongs to other people, and that are your responsibilities, and what are your, with regard to when you can use it, how you can use it, or when you're supposed to look for consent to use it, among those others. So the Data Commission actually is doing a good job. There are actually 3 sets of regulations which currently they are looking at, including also registration of data controllers and processors, and also issues of enforcement and compliance. So they're going to set up reporting methods, of which whenever you find there is an offense with regards to data which has been breached, you're able to report it. And once you report it, then very distinct measures can be taken. And I will really urge Kenyans to read this new law. It has very, as Madam Lilian will tell you, if you're on the other side of trouble, it can give you a lot of hard times. So we need to familiarize with it. Be careful whenever we're handling any other person's data, be it you're a political party, an individual, an influencer, or that bit. You just really need to take care of that of other people.
Okay. I'd like to invite Ken. We were having issues with Ken's audio. We really want to get your insights into a lot of what we've been discussing here, Ken, which is the effectiveness of the laws, the effectiveness of sort of civic education and getting the public to understand more about personal data being used for political campaigns, and also on the issue of the effectiveness of the prosecution. So you can speak to that, Ken. I'd asked your question earlier. And then also for the audience, please remember you can send in your questions. We'll also open it up to the room shortly. And we'll also speak to the code of conduct soon. Ken, if you can speak a little bit to those issues, please.
Thank you, Janet. I don't know if the audio is better now.
We're able to hear you in the room.
How about now, Janet? No, it doesn't seem to be working.
Ken, if you can just speak a little bit more, just for us to make sure we have your sound well.
Sorry, I'm trying my best, Janet. If you can't hear me, I think you have a very able panel. So let me just request that you proceed with them so that I don't struggle and do not interfere with the flow of the conversation. It's been going on I've been following for the past half hour. I think just proceed with those who are there.
I didn't even, can the room hear? No. Okay. Online, they can hear him pretty well. And I know he made a request just now, which even I didn't hear, unfortunately. I think, Ken, again, bear with us. We really want to make sure we get your points across. We're going to try and see whether it's an issue on this end or your end, but we'll come back to you shortly. Yeah, maybe move closer to the microphone. We'll see if that works.
I am speaking as loud and as close as I can to the microphone. So if you can't hear me, then let me just request that you go on with the three panelists who are there. I think they have it's a good panel that they have a grasp of all the issues. So even without me, you will have a good conversation with them. So just allow me to log off then.
Okay. I think if I understand Ken, he's sort of saying he may not be able to. Are you saying that we continue with the conversation?
Yes.
Okay.
Without me.
We really had hoped to get your views, but we can still continue to see. This is the new normal. It comes with all kinds of interruptions. So let's see if you can just hang on, because this conversation ends in about 20 minutes. If we can just see whether we can try you one more time, Ken. Again, apologies, bear with us. We'll try come back to you a little later to see if you can contribute, because we really wanted your thoughts on this. So just hang around another 20 minutes or so. And if that doesn't work again, we'll apologize. So sorry about that.
Okay.
I think now, as we sort of move towards the tail end of engagement with the public and with the room, we can also speak to, we were just talking a little bit about the tech companies and whether there's any, collaboration there. And also talking about digital codes of conduct for political players and technology companies in Kenya. Are those, they exist, are they effective? Again, we're going back to making sure that we have as much regulation as possible. I think we shouldn't undermine what it means if a lot of these issues go unchecked. We can't undermine what we've seen it do. So codes of conduct, regulating personal data. Can we speak to that as we invite the room to give us their questions as well?
Yeah, thank you, Janet. Of course, now the tech companies, especially the social media service providers, most of whom, of course, are hosted globally. I would like to say that they have really tried. They really tried to do what we call self-regulation. Most of them have put in place what they call community policies, of which if you are in breach of those community policies, action can be taken against you as a user of that network. Some which includes barring you from doing any more posts, or perhaps also stopping you completely from using that post, or perhaps suspending you for a while until you get it right. So some of them have shown interest in having local presence as we are heading towards the electioneering period. So we're already seeing a lot of discussions on those lines, and they're putting efforts in terms of mobilizing their teams, recruiting and making sure the preparation of them. Now, it's not a new thing for them, because globally, a number of other countries have been having elections, and such drills, such preparations, they do them in good time. And they're actually bringing on board a lot of experience in terms of how to handle issues on it, because they have seen it all, from all sorts of violent elections to those most advanced economies, to the least advanced economies. And we have already seen that they're bringing that interest within a country. And really have to appreciate their effort in this, because more and more countries globally are demanding more and more out of them. And they have taken this into consideration and actually set down ways and means of making sure that things of hate speech or associated to incitement, especially during the election period, are adhered to. The good thing about elections is they are set. Like in Kenya, we know it's a certain date of a certain month, all right? So you can prepare in good time. It's not going to come in terms of surprises, right? Like what's happening in some of the neighboring countries. This is, we can anticipate. We can tell what is happening. We can see the trends. NCIC actually, they do that on a daily basis. They can see what is happening. They can see which areas are hotspots, as Wycliffe was saying. And in so doing, preparations are done in good time. The notorious people are managed and taken care of by Lilian and team, among others. So Janet, that's what I would say for now, is in terms of what the service providers are doing. They're doing a great job. Of course, they can do more. They can assist, of course, in giving us resources for capacity building and awareness. They can use their platforms for specialized, targeted awareness within the Kenyan cyberspace, or within this period from now to then. So these are some of the negotiations which I think that talks have already begun, or perhaps they'll continue to begin. And I also want to speak to the committee which was formed last week, which is very key, a multi-agency committee that the government is really looking upon to have more collaboration with government agencies. And one of the indications that was put outright there is that there is room for collaboration for any other person who is a player in the cyber industry to join the technical team of that committee and to provide their inputs in various ways of assisting, not only in the general elections, but generally making the Kenyan cyberspace safe, and to use it more of what it is meant for, which is, of course, doing e-commerce, e-transactions. By the way, during the COVID period alone, and this is my last statement on this point, we had, I think, almost 50 to 55,000 new digital entrepreneurs. These are people who are doing their businesses online. So social media is not bad. Social media is very good. You can do business there. You can articulate your thoughts. You can articulate your visions, and you can make money out of it, right? So it's a good thing to do. But of course, now you need to have a balance. And lastly, for politicians, I think they really need to have one voice. So they need to verify their accounts, right? Have a blue tick so that it's known whenever Janet speaks, it's Janet who is speaking. Because there'll always be pseudo accounts or any other person would want to be Janet, and they will create new social media accounts and speak to them. So once you verify and you have a blue tick, then it automatically disqualifies or automatically negates all the other pseudo accounts or the copying accounts.
And then it's more straightforward to do the prosecution, because then you can see you can see who is verified and flouting digital rules.
Yes.
We can pause there and see if there are any questions. I can see some online. And Ken, again, if you're there, you can add your comments to the chat so that, again, we can use them. I can see there's 2 questions from the room, and then we can get some from the online space. So we have a question here. Okay, right here, yes. Maybe just your name and who it's directed to.
Thank you. My name is Kathy from Code for Africa. And my question likely would be addressed by the CA and the NCIC. I'm hearing a lot of collaboration, but for us at Code for Africa, what we do is, we are in the space of misinformation, disinformation every day. And we have a challenge when it comes to getting information from government agencies. I'm not hearing any collaboration with us, We have a policy where we say steal our stuff, for instance. You might not be fact checking, but because we are, you could amplify the things that we are doing so that then even the public is aware that there are people who are looking into misinformation and things like that. So I think what I'm asking is there room to collaborate with people like us who are in that space every day, so that then when we pick up something and flag it as fake, you're amplifying it. And then when it comes into your hands, it's easier to get into Lillian's hands as well, so that we see prosecution. So is there that? Can we have that cogwheel? That would be my question. Thank you.
Fantastic. We'll come and get an answer. We'll just get another question. Oh, now it looks like there's 2 more. We'll try and keep them really, really brief. There's a gentleman at the front, right here. As brief as you can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Kenna from People Daily. I've got 2 concerns. The NCIC have said about capacity. My question, even if you give NCIC a budget equivalent to that, maybe Ministry of Health or Defense, without political will, will there be a change? And they should tabulate, people who have been prosecuted and all that. I think NCIC and all that, such other bodies were created because of, it's just to please the donors and all that, because it's on and off since NCIC has been in existence. Is there a downtrend or an uptrend of hate speech? And the other question is to the DPP, what you had asked about the witness protection program. Why doesn't this witness be the first witness and it's put under certificate of urgency? So that instead of prolonging the case, because the more you prolong the case, the witness lives in the community, the MP is very powerful in the community, there's maybe even poverty and all that. If DPP is really serious into the job, they know very well there's likely to be a change and all that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions, Ken. I think we'll have to get 2 more briefly, because I know you put your hand up, the lady behind as well, but Fabian, you can go, then the lady behind. Yes, please go ahead.
All right, I'm just reading out one question that has come through online from Declan O'Brien. Are there any restrictions or emergency measures in place due to COVID-19 for example, for media and journalists, which might impact how the elections are conducted?
Okay, to influence how elections are conducted. Yes. All right, and the last question.
Okay, my name is Anne from the Election Observation Group. Nicaragua did the elections yesterday, that was on Sunday, and Facebook has pulled down over 900 plus Facebook accounts, Instagram about 363, and also Facebook pages about 140. So Kenya comes for elections, August 2022. And my gentleman from NCIC, the last time I checked, we still didn't have a definition for hate speech. I don't know if we still have it now. And you also spoke about that you have pulled down some accounts. Maybe you should tell us how many of these accounts have been pulled down, based on what, now that we don't even have a definition for hate speech. Then my friend from CAK, they say the devil is in the details. When you tell us to read the law, and I'm a layman Kenyan who cannot understand those technical terms, the question is, have you simplified the law so that I, as a mwananchi, can be able to read and understand? And also maybe to mention for the CAK gentleman, in January 2021, the equivalent of the CAK in Uganda had written to YouTube to pull down some 41 channels that belonged to Bobby Wine, and YouTube refused. So now in this time we come here to Kenya, do we see a scenario where some of the politics will play, and we see some of the channels, we see some of the Facebook posts brought down because of political affiliations? Then my lady from the ODPP, when will we stop politicizing cases? Because I remember we've taken politicians to court on matters hate speech, but those cases have either collapsed or they have not gone anywhere. So going for elections next year, do we see the trend doing the same, or are we going to see something different?
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions we can take for now. I think we can start with the last one where she talked about politicizing the cases and whether we'll see anything going forward. And then we'll try and address some of the other questions.
Thank you so much for your question. And let me say that as ODPP, we do not politicize cases. We prosecute, as I had said earlier on, it does not matter who you are. If an offense has been committed, it has reached the threshold, we will proceed and prosecute you without, for a lack of a better word, caring on who you are in the society. So we do not politicize, but we go according to the evidence, facts, and the law. So with regards to the cases that have been taken to court with regards to hate speech, most of them are pending. I have a list of here I could share with you on the status. Most of them are ongoing, but we are praying and hoping that we'll be able to finalize them before the election period. And let me just also mention something on witness protection. As you're aware, this is a totally independent agency that is run by a different director from the DPP. But what we've done is that we have sent an MOU with them, and we are able to fast track their cases, and that is in conjunction with the judiciary. So what usually happens is that if there's a case that a witness is protected, we reach out, and between the Witness Protection Agency, the judiciary, and ourselves, and we're able to fast track. But remember, a case does not only have the DPP or the Republic. There's the defense. Are they ready to, with the case to go for hearing? There's other challenges. I mean, are we as prosecution ready for hearing? Is the defense ready for hearing? Is the court ready for hearing? Is the accused person ready for hearing? Is the witness available? So there are other circumstances that might come to play, and as a result, the case may delay. But I can stay here without fear of contradiction. In cases where we're having the witnesses and the witness is willing and to come and testify, we usually try and escalate those cases so that they're heard on a priority basis. But remember also, witness protection is a voluntary. You may have a very key witness, but if the witness chooses not to get into the program, there's nothing you can do about it. So as you're saying, it is a matter of, again, going out and sensitizing the witnesses. And at the end of the day, I always say we are Kenyans. And as we are Kenyans, there are certain values that we must espouse. We must, as a Kenyan, not depending on the government, but just looking at it like in your house, you have some values. And these values are then slowly escalated to government and everyone. So as a Kenyan, I just urge all of us to be patriotic, because if you're patriotic, then even the issues we are discussing of misinformation, giving false information, escalating them, then if you have those values, then we may not be able to escalate those. We may not be able to retweet information that you know is wrong. You may not be able to share information that you know is wrong. So at the end of the day, I always say, as a Kenyan, it starts with me, it stops with me. It's not the government, it is you as a person. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We're, in the interest of time, we'll need to answer some of the other questions which were asked around simplifying the law for the public, issues around invitation to collaborate, and the definition of hate speech, and how many accounts have been pulled down. So we'll see if we can get through that. And I think a lot of these are for the two of you. So definition of hate speech, and also speaking to how many accounts roughly have been pulled down, just to give the impetus that something is being done.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it's good to ask the definition of hate speech. Sometimes the definition of hate speech, sometimes there is a Kenyan laws, American laws. In America, you talk about freedom of speech, but as per our act, NCC Act, which there defines very clearly what's about hate speech. One, hate speech will not combine anything. Read, uses threatening words, abusive or insulting words, behavior, or displays any written material. When I talk of displays, it's publishing in this platform, the digital things. Those are the kind of the definitions. But in some instances, some people will say that's freedom of speech. I'll go further. There is the tone, the language will be used the time you are publishing, the time you are insulting, those ethnic related. Because hate speech, you can talk about tribe A should move from different tribes. So those are the kind of parameters, entities, which you use for us if you are being charged with ethnic content. And I have an act with me, I'll share with you, which has some more definitions about that. Secondly, to answer, you talked about how many accounts we are put down. It's a daily basis. Like every day we can do, like, depending on the cases, which one, they are anonymous, they are fake. We do, like, from Facebook, from social media platforms, it can be 50, 30, but then later I can share you with the records. As per the quarter, we do them quarterly. I can give you the full records of accounts which we pull down. The only thing we pull down, there are those which we have not got enough evidence, or they are being propagated widely. Those are some of the things which you use. Thirdly, to answer the issue of collaboration, yes, we invite any people to collaborate with us, especially in advocacy, in training, and so on. If you go to our website, there is a portal there where you send your proposal, your collaboration, and the issue on matters, which area do you want us to collaborate. And I'm quite sure majority of people who have come across to have engaged us, they have been invited in our forums for that collaboration. So check in our website and you can share your proposal.
Thank you. Finally, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. On simplifying the law, yes, this is very important. We really need to simplify the law. Speaking particularly on the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, which was under litigation until some few months ago, and when the litigation process was over, it's when it was officially launched last week. So I believe these are some of the areas of working which will come on to demystify the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. But as far as the Kenya Information Communications Act, which is basically the main law for the Communications Authority, and we emphasize on consumer protection, and we believe the users of the cyberspace are part of it. A lot of effort has happened in this area. We have done road campaigns, we do online campaigns. We have also reached out to counties. And also, more importantly, now we even have the mobile app, the KSAT, which you can actually access, and we send 2 tips every week, and now we are concentrating more on demystifying the various laws and what they are. So it's an important app to download, And what we shall do is perhaps what we need to do is to sensitize more and more people to download this app so they can get a real-time sensitization and at the same time also be able to report. Okay. And it has the option of anonymous reporting. If you see something that you want to report and you don't want to give their identity, you can also do that, give us a tip, and then we're able to pick it up from there and go ahead. Okay. I have to speak to Kathy with regards to collaboration. And I think that's why we are here today, to meet you, to exchange the knowledge of what you have on your end. Personally, actually, I've never heard of your foundation. I just heard of it today. So I think it's why we are here to connect and to bond with each other, so that now we are able to see how best we can fit in terms of doing this huge awareness creation and collaboration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's where we'll leave it for now. A lot of the conversations we're having today, we need to expand on them. We definitely need more room to discuss them because the elections are coming closer every day. There's gaps that I think a lot of people might still would have wanted to hear how they can be addressed. Maybe what I can ask us, Center for Multiparty Democracy or the Kofi Annan Foundation is to see if we can collect resources that people can access online. You've talked about apps, you've talked about different bills, so that we can publish those and have the public aware. Also, aware of how they can report. There's reporting tools on your social media apps. I use them all the time. I'm very generous with blocking hate speech or reporting it. So yes, I understand that the impetus is on us as the citizens, but it's also on the institutions here. And part of what you mentioned towards the end with regards to witness protection may in a way also shed light on the fact that there needs to be strengthening of the entire institution for everything to be a seamless collaboration. Because we can speak to collaborations, but if the institutions aren't as strengthened or efficient, then the gaps begin to show. But all the same, we thank you, our panelists today. We have Joseph Nzano, the Communications Authority of Kenya. We have Ken Ogutu, who unfortunately couldn't participate, and we hope to get his thoughts at some point. We have Lillian, of course, from the Chief of Staff from the DPP's office, and we have Wycliffe Mwatu as well from NCIC. And thank you for the members of the public. Please continue to report, continue to engage. Thank you to the Kofi Annan Foundation, Center for Multiparty Democracy, and Baraza Media Lab as well. To all of you for watching online and for all of you in the room, I'm Janet Bogo. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you. But very insightful conversation by the panel. And indeed, we need this joint collaboration to be able to take action on some of the things that we discussed. We have a good panel coming in the afternoon. I've asked the online audience to please come back with fairly a long break of 1.5 hours so that we can continue the conversation in the afternoon. A few quick announcements is because we are sharing the microphones, we encourage that we continually speak with our masks on so that we do not risk each other. You know that microphone is one of the super spreaders of COVID-19, and we want to keep each other safe. So please have your mic or have your mask on when you have the mic so that you can protect each other. The pre-workshop survey is still ongoing. We have a QR code that you can access in the chat online as well as a link. Please take time over this lunch break to click in so that you can be able to fill in. For the in-person audience here, I think we'll be able to try and share as well, as much as on your WhatsApp or your email so that you can also be able to fill in. In the afternoon, we have an exciting panel moderated by Caroline Gaita, the Executive Director of Mzalendo Watch. It will have Honorable Mother Karua, Mr. Ben Waithaka, who from the Register of Political Parties, and Mule Msau, the National and Regional Coordinator of Election Observation Group. We have apologies from IEBC. They will not be able to make it to the panel on securing the digital space to promote transparent and fair political competition. We will miss them, but I'm sure that the three panelists will give us very good insights and of course link up to IEBC any other time to continue and further the conversation. So please stick in. We also have lunch that will be served between now and 1:50 p.m. so that we can network, we can follow up the conversations with the various state and non-state actors participating. Unfortunately for the online audience, we will not be able to catch up with you, but we look forward to your comments, your questions in the chat so that we can respond to them. So please, let's feel free. Where the tea was served, there's some lunch. We can be able to partake that as we continue to network and engage each other. So dialogue continues even over lunch. Karibuni sana. Please, let's have the panelists back for a group photo quickly. Please, thank you. Also remember to be seated at 1:50 p.m. so that you can start again in time at 2 p.m.
Sound check. Sound check. Sound check. Sound check. Sound check. Sound check. Yeah, blah, 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 blah.